before I start this video, I would want to say that this video should hit 50 likes. Can we hit 50 likes? That will be cool. Anyway, let's go on with the video. Okay, so here's a bit of a game. In the next 2 seconds, you have to think of a Filipino dish, okay? Let's start. Okay, now if you're from another country and don't think the Philippines exists, you were probably pacing around your mind for 2 seconds thinking about nothing. However, if you're familiar with the Philippines or you are Filipino yourself, you have probably thought about the sour dish known as adobo. So, what does this meal do and experience to receive the title as the most thought about Pinoy food? Well, let's talk about how it came to existence in the first place. Now, if you had experience handling food, you are familiar with how food spoils quickly and that, if not preserved, can make you have a little something called food poisoning. So, what you will do is to put the food into a can, drop it into a freezer, or let your local food agency put a bit of chemicals on it so that it can last longer. These methods of preserving food have been developed over time, and just like you, the native Filipinos also had methods of preserving their food. They cooked using moist heat methods like steaming or boiling, but more importantly, they would use plenty of vinegar and salt because these ingredients would produce a dangerous environment for bacteria and other spoilers of the like. These methods of preserving food were brought by Malay traders and settlers who landed in the Philippines, and later, Chinese traders would add a new ingredient to this preservation technique, soy sauce, but more commonly known in the Philippines as patis. Eventually, the Spanish came, and by the 1600s, they conquered a good chunk of the Philippines. This conquest attracted many Spanish priests who wanted to spread their beliefs to every nook and cranny of the world and eventually space, but only for now. One of these priests was a man called Pedro de San Buenaventura, who is known for being the first compiler of the Tagalog vocabulary while working in Laguna province in 1613, and he coined the word for this exact preservation process used by the native Filipinos, which is adobo, which was derived from the Spanish word adobar, meaning to marinate. Speaking of Spain, Spain and its close neighbor Portugal also had its own version of the adobo, which was different because it incorporated other ingredients such as spices like paprika and capsaicins. During the era of colonization, they introduced these foods to Latin American countries and regions such as Mexico, Puerto Rico, Peru, and Uruguay. The adobo of the Philippines actually evolved indigenously and was developed before the Spanish conquered the Philippines. In fact, there are many different types of adobo in the Philippines alone. Here are some examples. Chicken pork adobo is the most common and popular version of adobo, which contains, as you guessed, chicken and pork. This adobo uses mostly soy sauce for its dark color and salty flavor. Beef adobo is an adobo that uses ashueta water instead of soy sauce. If you don't know, ashueta is an orange-red condiment and food coloring that comes from the ashio tree. This makes the adobo less salty but also adds a reddish tinge to the dish. Adobo sagata is an adobo that is more commonly found in southern Luzon that adds coconut milk and green fingered chili peppers instead of black peppers. Adobo puso ng saging is an adobo from Cavite province that adds sliced white bananas along with shrimp paste and small shrimps. White adobo is an adobo that is not actually white, instead it got its name from the clear vinegar liquid. In fact, this recipe does not use soy sauce at all and uses the traditional way of cooking it. Crispy adobo is practically shredded leftover chicken and pork that is fried in hot oil until they are crispy. Out of all these adobo, this one has the longest shelf life. Squid adobo uses seafood instead of livestock meat, with the sauce actually being squid ink, making it the darkest out of all adobo. And finally, apan-apan adobado is an adobo from Visayas that uses kangkong, which is local water spinach. Going to the present day, adobo is one of the most widely cooked Filipino meals in not only the Philippines, but also the world. Since over 300 years of Spanish, American, and Japanese colonization, Filipinos have evolved the dish into different forms, from the traditional salt and vinegar seasoning to more modern forms, such as adobo sushi. Yes, that's an actual recipe. But one thing is certain, adobo is and will continue to be an important Filipino dish.